India's relationship with the United Kingdom over the years has only gone from strength to strength. We are valuable strategic allies, but it's a relationship which is premised not just on that strategic relationship, there's a strong economic relationship. But I would suggest it's the people-to-people connect, and that's been true for forever. That really defines the relationship and where it stands now. Lord David Cameron with us, the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Wonderful to have you with us at the NDTV World event. Many of us in India believe that, internationally there is a bit of an inflection point on where India stands. One of India's longest demands has been a reform of the United Nations system, that, it needs to be more than just the P5. And the problem that India encounters is that inevitably there's a China veto if you're talking about UN Security Council reform. What's the way forward in that?
Well, I think Britain strongly supports India's membership of the UN Security Council. We should continue to make that clear, and the Prime Minister has done that, and I agree with him about that. The problem, as you say, is Security Council reform is incredibly difficult to get done.
Yes.
Everyone seems to be in favour of it in principle, but it doesn't happen in practice. I think, therefore, we shouldn't put all our efforts on that. At the same time, we should be asking ourselves, what more can we do to include India and Indian leadership in organisations like the G20? India now comes almost routinely to the G7, and I think that's right as a fellow democracy. And then what are the other things where we can work together, working through the Commonwealth, India's new position in the Quad, Britain's bilateral relationship? All these things should reflect India's leadership in this century.
You were Foreign Secretary earlier on, then of course Prime Minister, Foreign Secretary again. Where did that strategic relationship between India and the United Kingdom really start prospering? I remember naval exercises being held over a period of time. There was a sense of distrust, which got replaced with this close strategic association. It was very much during your time.
Yeah, when I became leader of the Conservative Party in 2005, India was the first country outside Europe that I visited. And again, as Prime Minister in 2010, the first country I visited outside Europe. And that was because I very much foresaw this Indian century, that India was going to be a growing global power. And Britain had this historical relationship, of course, but much more important, a relationship about business and a relationship, as you say, about people. And so we should be trying, we don't always agree about everything, but we should be trying to have this dialogue and this closer partnership. And I think there's still a lot to be done. We haven't yet got our free trade agreement across the line. But that shouldn't be the limit of what we do. That should be, I think, one of the first steps, and then try and build on that collaboration and try and work together on these global issues, whether it's what's happened in Ukraine, whether it's the situation in the Middle East. And I think crucially, where we really have a common interest and so many things we can do together, and that is the green transition. How do we deal with climate change? How do we turn our power generation and our industries into green and sustainable industries? And India is showing great strides forwards on that, and Britain has a lot of technology and expertise that we should be working with you on.
One of the big concerns, of course, with the United Kingdom and India, the global community, is terrorism. And there is a sense in India that in the West there could be double standards. For example, on the entire issue of Khalistan, you know how it's playing out presently in the United States and Canada. But there are Khalistani supporters even in the United Kingdom, and the sense that they've attacked a High Commissioner in London, for example. The sense is that we aren't getting as much help as New Delhi would like from say, America, Canada, or even the United Kingdom in addressing this very serious security concern. How would you?
Well, I think, first of all, we need to reaffirm that Britain and India are both victims of terrorism and have an interest in working together. We have both suffered particularly from extremist Islamist terror, and as have you here in India. I think we then need a really deep and clear dialogue where we try and explain to each other any differences we might have. Which groups do we determine are terrorist groups and which do we not, and try to understand any differences we might have. But fundamentally, Britain opposes terrorism as India does, and we should try and form a close partnership on that.
Do you believe India has potentially a significant role in finding an outcome in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia?
India is clearly a country that has historic relations with Russia, which we respect. But also, Prime Minister Modi, in my view, absolutely rightly, has recently made a visit to Ukraine, which I think was extremely important. My view is that, yes, of course, we want to see this conflict end, but it needs to end in a way where it's clear Russia has not materially benefited from its war of aggression. In my political lifetime, I can't see a clearer example of one country totally unjustifiably invading another, violating its borders, violating its territorial integrity. So anything India can do to try and bring about an outcome where it's clear that the war will end but Putin will not benefit would be welcome. And let's be clear about something else that's been happening. You know, Putin has been luring Indians to Russia to go and work in various industries, and some of them have ended up on the front line. So, you know, Indian boys are being sent.
They're being sent back now, fortunately.
I know, but it's appalling this ever happened. It's also happened to Africans as well. Putin is trying to hoodwink other countries to send their workers to his country, and they're ending up dead on the front lines. Yeah. And I think countries like India or other countries in the global south who sometimes have taken a nuanced view on this conflict should be clear that, one, it was the territorial integrity of Ukraine that was attacked by Putin, and two, some of their own people are ending up dead on the front line.
So India's consistently said, and in fact, Prime Minister Modi said it to President Putin a few months back, that look, Ukraine's territorial integrity is not for negotiation. We follow the UN laws, and he went to Moscow and he said this to him. At the same time, we import Russian oil. The West doesn't like it. Now, India says, look, even in that there are double standards. But the basis of the foreign policy of this government seems to be India first, huge economy. We need the fuel, and it has stabilized international fuel prices. That's one of the arguments which has been given. Is the West, has the West dealt with India's argument that, look, we will continue to import Russian oil and we will continue to hope that the war ends?
Well, obviously, we want as many countries as possible to join the embargo against Putin, because purchasing Russian oil feeds the Russian war machine. It pays for the weapons that are being used to violate Ukraine's territorial integrity. Now, obviously, every country has to make up their own mind what they do, but my plea would be to look at what you do and to ask, are we helping to support the Russian war machine? And crucially, are there companies now operating either in India or elsewhere that are actually providing dual-use goods to Russia so that they can have more shells, more ammunition, more drones, more parts for their equipment? Because we need this war to end.
Yeah. We were talking about the territorial sanctity of nations, obviously, in the context of Ukraine. But, India faces concerns. The small Himalayan nation of Bhutan, their prime minister is over here, faces a threat from China. It's very visible. We see it in the South China Seas as well. Do you see China being perhaps the greatest threat or challenge to the notion of territorial sanctity, certainly in Asia?
Well, what we've said is that China represents an epochal challenge to the world order with the way that they are behaving at the moment. Now, I think one of the things we've got to try and do is manage the rise of China so that it doesn't end in conflict. But I think the more clear we can be about the importance of territorial integrity, about the importance of trying to abide by international rules and norms, the better off we'll be. We have seen a more aggressive China in recent years. We've seen it on your border. We've seen it with respect to the Philippines. We've seen it with respect to the South China Sea. We've seen it with respect to the Uyghurs, and also a special interest for the UK with China's treatment of Hong Kong. So I think the message, and the more we can be united in giving this message, is that, of course, China's a vital part of the world economy. China's rise is inevitable. China becoming a leading power in the way that it has, we all accept that. But the way China behaves will determine how other countries work with it. And I think Britain and India have a common interest there.
One final question. Obviously, there are thousands of Indian students who go to the United Kingdom and study. There was a concern, the former Prime Minister Sunak had expressed his concern on the numbers who should be allowed to remain in the United Kingdom on the graduate visa route or on a skilled worker route. And there was a lot of opposition from British universities saying that there should be no cutting down on certain categories of visa. Why? Because then students would want to come to British universities. So at the moment, there's nothing that's fundamentally changed. But what is your message and your suggestion to people back home and to potential students over here?
Well, I would say the same in India as I would say back at home. And it's that there is no limit on the number of students from India that can come and study. They have to have an English language qualification. They have to have a place in a British university. But we don't want to put a limit on that. We want to welcome that. But at the same time, what we've got to deal with in Britain is the illegal migration, mostly happening at the moment across the English Channel, which calls our whole immigration system into question. It saps public confidence in it. And so the new government has got to try and deal with the illegal migration, and then that will make the arguments about how much we benefit from people coming to study in our country easier. There was one thing that the Sunak government changed, which I thought was right, which was saying that, people studying an undergraduate degree shouldn't be able to bring family members. Yeah. And I think that, what we have to be careful of is that our immigration system, our legal immigration system, is not being used to try and get round the rules. So if people are coming to study, come and study. If you're actually trying to bring your whole family, that is a different matter. Yeah. So we have to keep a close eye, but I think actually Britain has a very compelling offer to Indian students. Come and study at our great universities. There's the opportunity to work afterwards. And I think that bears comparison with other countries around the world.
And before you leave, I must ask you a final question, since you love cricket. Joe Root appears to be unstoppable at this stage. Can I just ask you a question that might make you quite unpopular over here in India? Do you believe that Root is better than Kohli?
I think we have to let the statistics do the talking. And what's exciting about Root is that even though he's been playing for England for a long time, he's been captain, he's now in his post-captaincy world, he is a run-making machine and beautiful to watch. And I think the statistics will do the talking, and he is starting to overtake some of the all-time greats,
including potentially Tendulkar. He possibly has a sight.
Well, that would be. He's got a way to go to cross the Tendulkar mark, but in the end, let's let the stats do the talking. But as an English cricket fan, it's an absolute joy to watch.
Lord David Cameron, thank you very much.
Thank you
for speaking to us. Thanks very much indeed.
Co-presented by Intelligence Meets Art with Motorola H50 Pro. And Amity University, ranked amongst the top 3% universities globally.